Hello and blessings, beautiful souls. Saravá and I share to you. How are you today? It is so nice to be looking into your beautiful smiling faces. So I would like to welcome you back to my channel and introduce today's topic for discussion, and that is resources, books, blogs, podcasts, etc., specifically geared towards the beginner witch. Now, it's not that these resources that I'm mentioning are made for specifically the beginner witch. I find that they are a wealth of resource that will help you to get introduced to a variety of new concepts and new philosophies, and as such broaden your wisdom and broaden your knowledge and understanding of the subject of witchcraft, which will in turn help you to deepen your understanding overall and find your way through the maze of information and resources that are available on the subject of witchcraft. There is no doubt about it. Navigating the vast pool of resources on the subject of witchcraft can be tedious at best. There is so much wonderful knowledge out there, and there are so many that are contributing to the vast pool of knowledge. Every day that pool of knowledge grows and grows and grows, and right now it can be quite tricky to find those very, very good resources that will help you personally to find your footing in the practice of witchcraft. So that's why I'm here, that's why I'm doing this video. I'm going to help you with those resources. So let's get stuck into the subject of this video. Okay, so we are going to be starting off with book recommendations. Now, I have split up each of these sections into two parts. The first part is neo-pagan resource material, and the second part is traditional witchcraft material. If you would like to know the difference between neo-pagan witchcraft and traditional witchcraft, then I would love for you to be able to check out the video that I posted last week on that very subject. I will link it in the cards up the top and in the description box below. Moving on, however, we will be starting with neo-pagan witchcraft books, and my recommendations are geared towards a more well-rounded knowledge base. So I am offering a little something for everyone here, and hopefully this will be of interest and value to you. So grab that pen and paper, be sure to take some notes, and I will also be linking some of these titles in the description box below to help you out just that little bit further. The first book that I would like to recommend to you is Weave the Liminal by Tempest Zakroff. Now, Weave the Liminal is a neo-pagan read that is specifically focused on eclectic Wiccan witchcraft. There is a heavy Wiccan influence throughout this book. However, it does diversify and bring in other neo-pagan philosophies, thought processes, and patterns. What I loved about this book is that the author was able to really tap into the modern landscape of witchcraft, particularly from the neo-pagan perspective, and offer you a variety of approaches and answers to questions that most commonly crop up in today's landscape of witchcraft. So it's a really simple, easy, interesting read. The author is quite direct. She writes quite well, and you won't have any problem struggling through this book. You will be able to understand the concepts and theories that she does bring up throughout this book, and she explains things quite nicely. So it is a great beginner resource book, one of the best that I have seen out there, and it specifically relates to eclectic witchcraft and its modern counterparts. The next book that I would like to recommend to you is Wicca, A Seeker's Guide by Thorn Mooney. Now, Thorn Mooney is also a fellow YouTuber, and she is a rather academically oriented individual. She has written this, her first book, Wicca, A Seeker's Guide, as a means of introducing the subject of Wicca and its entirety to those who are entering into the neo-witchcraft scene. Now, one thing that I really enjoy about this book is that it's written from a Guardinarian perspective, and if you are new to the concept of Wicca, then Guardinarian Wicca is considered one of the most traditional forms of Wicca. It was in fact Gerald Gardner who invented or brought about or constructed the practice or the tradition of Wicca, and as such he is considered the founding father. So Guardinarian Wicca is one of the most original forms of Wicca that is out there. Since then, many other traditions of Wicca have come about, but this one is as traditional as you can get. So Thorn has been a dedicant of Wicca for the longest time. She is a high priestess and she writes from a point of view of both academic understanding and personal knowledge and perspective. So it makes this a very interesting read. One reason why I have chosen to recommend this book is because what you will often find within the context of neo-paganism are practices that belong to the tradition of Wicca being utilized as straight neo-pagan witchcraft. So what I find is helpful is that at least when you see someone casting a circle, for instance, or using, you know, wands and chalices and things that are more Wiccan-esque in their way, not that they are specific to Wicca, but they are more prevalent in the practice of Wicca, you at least understand where exactly these tools and these philosophies and these practices are coming from. So Wicca, A Seeker's Guide by Thorn Mooney is on my list of recommended reads, especially if you are interested in the subject of Wicca. Now, the next book that I would like to recommend to you is Witches and Wizards by Lucy Cavendish. Now, what I love about this book is that it's relatively recent in its release, but it focuses on some of the more notorious personalities within the landscape of witchcraft. And this is looking at it from a mythological perspective, so you will find the Witch of Endor and also like stories of King Arthur and Merlin throughout the book, but you will also find stories on Aleister Crowley and some of the witches that went through the Salem witch trials. So there is a selection of stories that pertains to each of these notorious characters, and it helps to just have a read. It's a fairly easy read, something super easy to digest, but it gets you engaged with some of the names and the influences that contributed to some of the material, some of the resources, and also some of the mythology and stories that float about in our modern witch landscape. So that is Witches and Wizards by Lucy Cavendish. The next book that I would like to recommend to you is The Rebirth of Witchcraft by Doreen Valiente. Now, put simply, Doreen Valiente is a household name. Many a practitioner of witchcraft recognize the name of this astounding woman and her contributions to the witchcraft community. This is a more autobiographical type of read, and one that is really worthwhile sinking your teeth into because it allows you an insight into the practice and the landscape of a practitioner that contributed quite a bit to resources on witchcraft, specifically resources on Wicca. And so she has a tremendous amount of wisdom to offer, and you will not be disappointed with this read. It gives you a really great insight into Wiccan practices and so much more. She was a really great writer, and she is someone that is held in quite high regard within the community as far as neo-paganism is concerned. My last recommendation under the category of neo-pagan witchcraft books goes to the Temple of Witchcraft series by Christopher Penczak. The Temple of Witchcraft books are a succession of books that are designed as a type of coursework. You follow them through in terms of a year and a day study, which is quite typical for neo-pagan witchcraft. So Christopher Penczak leans quite a bit into eclectic Wicca, but he is able to provide you with a really great foundation of knowledge on modern witchcraft in a more neo-pagan perspective. His writing style is good. He is very instructional, lists and lists and lists, and some people really enjoy that style. But like I said, this series of books is designed to be worked through slowly. It's not necessarily designed to be sat there and read and devoured. It really is something that you slowly move through, and for that reason it is a great little addition to your neo-pagan witchcraft library. Like I said, that is the Temple of Witchcraft series, which is 3 books by Christopher Penczak. Next, I have some recommendations for you that fall under the title of traditional witchcraft. And so I'm going to start off with a really popular book called The Cornish Book of Ways by Gemma. The Cornish Book of Ways talks specifically about traditional witchcraft from a geographical location, that being the landscape that is Cornwall in Britain. And so Gemma is an avid writer and practitioner of traditional Cornish witchcraft, and is coming at this book from a very personal perspective. So personal, in fact, that she includes photographs of her own practice, of herself in practice, of herself in sacred space throughout this book. So if you are interested in traditional witchcraft and you are interested in reading traditional witchcraft from the perspective of a true, genuine traditional witch of the Cornish witchcraft variety, then you will very much love this book, The Cornish Book of Ways by Gemma. The next book that I have for you under the banner of traditional witchcraft is A Deed Without a Name by Lee Morgan. Lee Morgan is an Australian author who comes from a family lineage and has written his first witchcraft reference book on traditional witchcraft. This is a really interesting book, and Lee's writing style is quite poetic in the way that he moves through his words. He presents these really interesting theories, these experiences, these practices, and he presents them all in a story-like format that is quite tasty to read. The book is a small read, but an interesting and a nourishing one, and Lee Morgan does it justice. So that is A Deed Without a Name by Lee Morgan. The next book that I would like to recommend to you is by Beson, Stang and Sword by Chris Orapello and Tara Love Reid. I hope I got those names correct, actually. So this is a traditional witchcraft book, and it is designed as a book that will present to you the bare bones of the practice of traditional witchcraft from a Western perspective, of course. Chris Orapello and Tara Love Reid are responsible for Down at the Crossroads, a podcast which I will be recommending a little later on in the podcast section, and they are practitioners of traditional witchcraft. They do live in America, and so their practice of traditional witchcraft is more Americanized, and as such you'll get that more Americanized perspective involved in that subject matter. And so it's a relatively new book. It's a very interesting read, and it's one that you will need to take your time with just a little bit, but it is a pretty approachable type of read, and one that you are going to find to be quite informative. The next book that I have for you today is Working Conjure by Hoodoo Sen-moi. I hope I've pronounced his name correctly, because it's one of those names that you just like, Nevertheless, this is a book about hoodoo, which is American folk magic of the diaspora persuasion. And so this is the magic that really originated in the Americas and resulted from the African slave trade. So it is very specific to America and that particular region. This is not to say that people don't practice hoodoo all over the world, because they do, but that is the birthplace of hoodoo. And Hoodoo Sen-moi has written this book that just breaks it all down. It really simplifies it. It makes it accessible and approachable. It lays it all down there. It gets you familiar with the terminology and some of the more interesting practices, and it's a pretty friendly and easily approachable type of read. So if you're interested in the subject of hoodoo, folk magic, conjure and root work, that one is for you. So the last book recommendation that I have for you under the title of Traditional Witchcraft is Silent as the Trees by Gemma. Now, this is the second Gemma book that I have mentioned throughout this list of recommendations for traditional witchcraft books, and the reason for that is because I rather like Gemma. Now, what I loved about this particular book, and we recently covered this book in my Patreon book club, The Magical Library, is that it is written from the perspective of Cecil Williamson, and a lot of what you are going to find here is extracted from the Museum of Witchcraft in Great Britain. And so you have evidence, you have relics, you have so many tangible aspects to be found within this book that a story is then attached to those relics, those practices, and so on. There is also mention of notorious witches of that particular era and that particular region, and it gives you a little insight into a different style of magic that is practiced. There is quite a bit of interesting reading here, and some of it can be quite macabre, some of it can be spooky, some of it can be downright funny. And so she has a really approachable writing style, and as such presents the information pretty plainly, pretty simply, so that you can really sink your teeth into it. This was a really great book if you're interested in learning more about traditional witchcraft of that particular region. Perhaps you have ancestral ties to that particular region, or you've traveled, or you are actually from near that area. Then this would make a really interesting read for you and a great addition to your witch's library. Now, before I move on to blogs, I just wanted to quickly mention that when it comes to books on witchcraft, it really comes down to the publisher. In fact, the publisher will indicate what style of book you are actually receiving. And so, Llewellyn is a well-known publishing house for neo-pagan literature, and what you are going to find there is entry-level material, entry-level books that are geared towards practical beginner type of things, and it's all very neo-pagan. What you will find in other publishing houses varies slightly, because Llewellyn has made beginner neo-pagan books their primary niche, mind, body and spirit, their primary niche. Then when you're looking for information on traditional witchcraft, then you have to go via different avenues. So Troy Books tends to publish a lot of traditional witchcraft books. They are the publishing house for Gemma, of which I mentioned 2 of her books. And you will also get Three Hands Press. That's another great publishing house that you can look at, as well as Scarlet Imprint, which is a UK-based publishing house that focuses on a lot more traditional materials. And so you are going to get more of a niche occult book version or variety out of these publishing houses that sits quite separate to that more palatable beginner entry-level type of neo-pagan witchcraft. So if you are serious about really developing a solid practice, then it's important to look for those books that are going to give you the edge, that are going to give you that knowledge that is needed for you to have autonomy over your practice. And so publishing houses are important to witches. We pay attention to this type of thing, so it's worth mentioning the difference between publishing houses and what you can more or less expect from each of these different publishing houses. Keep in mind that there are many, many other independent metaphysical book publishers, and if you are interested in more metaphysics and new age witchcraft, neo-pagan type of magics and works, then you are going to be able to find a ton of publishing houses that really focuses on that. So the next category that I'm going to be discussing right now are blogs. Yes, people do still blog. Not that I'm much of a blog reader, but I do read a select few. Now, what I would like to begin with saying is that there is a type of a little universe called Patheos Pagan, where a lot of pagans like to go and blog. So if you're interested in falling down a rabbit hole of blogs, then by all means do check out Patheos Pagan and peruse the authors there. You are bound to find something that tickles your fancy. But it's an interesting concoction of minds that you're going to find on Patheos Pagan, and keep that in mind. Now, one that I would recommend is Thorn Mooney. Now, Thorn Mooney is the author of Wicca, a Seeker's Guide, which I mentioned in Neo-Pagan books. And she does a lot of writing for Patheos Pagan, and she's a really, really good writer. That is her niche. So if you're interested in hearing more from that author, she also has a blog there on Patheos Pagan. The next recommendation for blog that I have for you is a very good friend of mine, and in fact he is my neighbor. This is Gordon White and his Rune Soup blog. So Gordon is a chaos magician who has a particular taste for grimoire magic, and what you are going to find is a whole lot of weird and wonderful magic on his blog. That's the one thing that you will never ever get disappointed with, is his variety. His tastes are wild and varied, and he loves to document things. He's a great writer, he's an author of books and also a podcaster, but I'll get to that later on. The next blog that I will be recommending for you today is that of Sarah Ann Lawless. Now, Sarah Ann Lawless is a type of a veteran within the blogging community. She is very well known, and if you were to drop her name in any witchcraft circle, there would be many who would know who she is. Her work is geared more towards traditional witchcraft. She's a huge fan of Robert Cochrane and is influenced therefore by Robert Cochrane. She also walks the poison path. And this is a nice way of saying that she works with balms and unguents, entheogens and hallucinogens, and she makes flying ointments and other, you know, tasty treats for altering the consciousness of a witch. And she is quite well known in her craft in that capacity. Damn shame she doesn't ship to Australia. I really wish that she did. The last recommendation that I have for you today, and yes, this was a short list of recommendations, is The Otherworld Oracle by Nicole Canfield. Now, Nicole Canfield was actually once upon a time a YouTuber just like myself, and she moved away from YouTube to focus on writing. Nicole is a die-hard writer. She writes so much. She has published books, fiction books on the Cotton family series. I think it's called Familiar Spirits, if memory serves me correctly. But she also likes to write factual reference material, and she's very, very interested in old folk magic. She has written, I would say about 1,000 hub pages. Like, this woman writes. That's what she does. She freaking writes. And you are going to find so much under her name, under her influence. And so check out The Otherworldly Oracle. I'll leave the links in the description below, of course, because otherwise it'll be tricky to find this if you're just keying in details in Google. But I'll leave those links. Keep in mind. But yes, definitely do check out Nicole Canfield's Otherworldly Oracle. She's amazing and a buddy, so I'd like to recommend my buddies when I can. So we're at the section of podcasts now, and I really only have 2 podcasts for you because I'm very picky when it comes to podcasts. I just am. And so I have for you the following. Rune Soup by Gordon White. So I've mentioned his blog, but I must mention his podcast because they are amazing, or it is amazing. But he interviews some incredible people, some incredible personalities, and you're never going to get the same old with Gordon. His interest pool is wide and varied, and he is attracted to many, many different types of philosophies and magic and just... oh, it's so tasty. So Gordon will interview anyone of huge interest, honestly. Huge interest to himself, which then becomes huge interest to many other people. He has a wonderful way with words. He is quite the elegant speaker, and his podcasts really are informative. They're about an hour long. You can pop them on and go about your day doing the things that you like to do and just listen to what he has to say and the wonderful conversations that he has with these incredible people. How he finds half of the people that he finds is beyond me, but Gordon is well connected in that regard. He is an author, he is a podcaster, he is a writer of blogs, and he has been around for quite some time. And so he is quite well respected for who he is and what he does. So it's an absolutely incredible podcast that I would highly recommend, and it's up there as my favorite. Yes. The next recommendation for podcast that I have for you today is Down at the Crossroads by Chris Orapello and Tara Love Reid. Now, if you remember at the beginning of this video where I was recommending books on traditional witchcraft, I recommended By Beson, Stang and Sword, which I said was written by Chris Orapello and Tara Love Reid. And I also dropped hints that they had a podcast that you could listen to. So this is me telling you all about their podcast. So they interview some really interesting people. They interview the who's who of modern witchcraft and all that that entails. Their particular breed of podcast is part music, neo-pagan-esque music, and part interview style. And so if there's someone releasing a book, they're going to pounce on that and give them an interview. So it gives you an understanding or a more behind the scenes look at some of the authors that are releasing books nowadays. So they're really, really interesting to listen to, and if you enjoy neo-pagan music, then you're going to enjoy his podcast just that little bit more. If you are not familiar with neo-pagan music, then that is one way to become quite familiar with neo-pagan music, because yes, the wonderful world of witchcraft has its own music. It does. And you're going to listen to a lot of it if you listen to Down at the Crossroads. So next, what I have for you is a sweet, simple little ritual designed to help you to find your way through the maze of information that is in existence at this very moment in time in the wonderful world of witchcraft. So if you wouldn't mind indulging me, please grab yourself a journal and a pen, or a piece of paper and a pen. We witches, we love to journal, and so of course I'm going to recommend that you get a journal at some point in your practice. It's very therapeutic and it's a wonderful way of documenting your witchy adventures. And so once you have that, I want you to just sit calmly in a comfortable position, somewhere where you feel, you know, pretty relaxed, pretty at ease. And when you're ready, close your eyes and take 3 deep and cleansing breaths. Really inhale from the belly, exhale. Move your neck and just start to get yourself a little bit looser. If you've been sitting for a period of time, if you're not comfortable for whatever reason, just move your body. Just, you know, get it into a fluid mindset, or a fluid, you know, space. And when you're comfy and cozy, I want you to intuitively just listen and write. There is no thinking here. There's no room for thinking. You intuitively write the first thing that pops into your head. It could be anything, whatever it is, the first thing that pops into your head. You ready? Close your eyes. Really sink into this one. When you hear the word witchcraft, what does it mean to you? Quickly write down your response. Don't think. Don't let your logical mind step in. When you think of a witch's practice, what comes to mind? Don't think about it, just let it happen naturally. Anything. And if nothing comes through, just leave it blank, it's fine. When you think about a part of the world that holds incredible power, where does your mind take you? What geographical location does it bring you to? Next question is tradition important to you? Are you interested in the old world? Are you interested in modern practices? When you have a list of answers just scribbled out on paper, I want you to really look at those answers, those responses. If you've done this exercise correctly, and I use the term correctly loosely, what you will have there is a list of subconscious words that are associated to some of the questions that I asked. this will give you some insight into where your pool of interest is going, is leaning into, what directions that you may subconsciously be wanting to go towards. So take a good hard look at the words that have ended up on that page and try to acclimate to some of that reasoning, particularly if some of the words that are on the page at this very moment in time are quite foreign to you, or they might be a little scary to you, or they might be a little unusual to you. Who knows? There's many ways that this little exercise can play out. But I promise you that I have done this exercise with many a group of new practitioners to witchcraft, and what comes up can be quite interesting. If you allow your rational mind to step in and to judge the moment and to speak on your behalf, then the process isn't intuitive. And so if you were not able to quieten your mind enough, then just put this on pause and have another go at it. And have another go at it until you can finally feel as though you have separated yourself from that conscious thought stream and that you are responding intuitively in the moment. So I hope that you found this little exercise helpful, and that it gives you an insight into a positive direction that you can head as far as your study of witchcraft goes. My next video is going to focus on some of the more common misconceptions and misinformations surrounding the practice of witchcraft as a whole. And so I hope that you'll be able to really sink your teeth into that one and understand a little bit about what goes on and just how much misinformation is out there in the wonderful world of witchcraft. It's for this reason that I felt compelled to do these types of videos. They were requested of me time and time again, and it's something that I am excited to be able to offer to not just my subscribers, but to new subscribers that might be in that position where they're really struggling to find a common thread throughout the entire landscape of witchcraft. So I hope that my information here is well received. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Leave some comments below telling me if you have a favorite podcast, if you have a favorite blog that you like to read, and we can all then learn from one another and discover new and exciting resources. So there you have it. That is it for today. Wishing you so much love, luck, peace and joy, and I will see you in the next video. Mwah. Bye.